I was reaching for the last purple tomatillo when our fingers collided. That's how I met her, the woman who would turn my carefully constructed life into beautiful chaos. Sorry, I said, pulling back my hand. You take it. She smiled, her blue eyes crinkling at the corners. We could share it. I only need half for my salsa verde anyway. There was something magnetic about her, tall with chestnut brown hair gathered in a messy bun, tan skin that spoke of days spent outdoors. Not the typical Albuquerque farmer's market regular. I'm Lindsay, she said, extending her hand. Lindsay Rivera. Ella Wright, I replied, noticing the strength in her grip. Sand sculptor by trade, amateur chef by necessity. Sand sculptor? Her eyebrow arched. That's not something you hear every day. I laughed. Yeah, I get that a lot, but it pays the bills, mostly. The vendor interrupted, handing us each half of the tomatillo in separate bags. You ladies figure out how to make this work? He asked with a knowing smile. Lindsay turned to me. So what were you planning to make with this? Honestly, I found a recipe online and thought I'd experiment. I'm not exactly an expert with these. My grandmother would roll in her grave. She laughed. These make the best salsa in New Mexico, but only if you know the secret. Before I could respond, fat raindrops began splattering the market canopies. Within seconds, the gentle shower transformed into a deluge. People scattered, grabbing purchases and running for cover. Come on! Lindsay grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward a nearby coffee shop awning. We huddled there, watching the sudden summer storm transform the street into a river. So, about that secret recipe, I prompted, shaking water from my blonde hair. Lindsay's eyes sparkled with mischief. My family recipe for 3 generations. I don't share it with just anybody. I'm not just anybody, I countered. I'm the woman you're sharing a tomatillo with. That made her laugh. A rich, genuine sound that sent unexpected warmth through my chest. Fair point. Tell you what, I'll trade you the recipe for a story about how someone becomes a professional sand sculptor. The rain showed no signs of letting up, so I told her everything. My fine arts degree, my first beach competition, the corporate clients who hired me for conventions and hotel displays. She listened intently, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested, not just being polite. When I finished, she kept her promise, detailing her grandmother's salsa recipe with animated hands. The resort keeps me busy, she mentioned casually when I asked what brought her to the market. I own Beach Dreams Resort just outside town. The restaurant there uses local ingredients whenever possible. Wait, you own Beach Dreams? I couldn't hide my surprise. I've been meaning to contact your events manager. I'm looking for venues for my summer exhibition. The rain finally eased, but neither of us moved to leave. Forget the events manager, Lindsay said, her gaze direct and interested. Why don't you come by tomorrow and show me what you have in mind? Maybe we can work something out. As she wrote her personal number on the back of a business card, thunder rumbled in the distance. Something told me this chance meeting wasn't just about tomatillos or business opportunities. Something bigger was beginning. I just didn't know how dangerous and beautiful it would turn out to be. Beach Dreams Resort wasn't what I'd expected. Instead of some corporate monstrosity, Lindsay had created something that looked organic to the landscape. Low-lying buildings with living roofs, pathways made of reclaimed wood, and everywhere, the careful integration of dunes and native plants. This is incredible, I said as Lindsay led me across the property. The air smelled of sage and salt, though we were miles from any actual ocean. I wanted something that felt authentic to New Mexico while still giving people that escape feeling, Lindsay explained, her hand occasionally touching my elbow to guide me. The artificial lagoon uses the same filtration system as natural wetlands. I found myself watching her more than the architecture. The way the sun brought out auburn highlights in her brown hair, how her linen shirt fluttered against her lean frame in the breeze. And here's where I thought your exhibition might work. She gestured to a large open area near the resort's main gathering space. We could rope it off, put up some shade structures. The lighting at sunset is perfect. This would be ideal, I agreed, already envisioning my sculptures taking shape here. I usually work with a theme. What if I created pieces that reflect the resort's eco-conscious design? Lindsay's smile made something flutter in my chest. Antine, I'd love that. Most artists want to do mermaids or pirates. This would be so much more meaningful. As she was showing me the area, I noticed two men in dark suits walking purposefully toward the east wing. They were conspicuously out of place among the resort guests in their casual wear. Business associates? I nodded toward them. Lindsay's expression changed so subtly I almost missed it, a tightening around her eyes, a forced casualness. Investors. They're interested in expanding the property. Before I could ask more questions, she steered me toward a small cafe. Let me buy you lunch, and we can discuss the details of your exhibition. Over grilled fish tacos, we hammered out the business arrangements, my fee, the exhibition dates, the marketing plan. But the conversation kept drifting to personal territory. So no husband or partner helping with the heavy lifting of sand sculpture? Lindsay asked, then quickly added, I'm always curious how artists manage the business side. No husband, no partner, I replied, studying her reaction carefully. The business side isn't my strength, but I've learned. What about you? Running a resort alone seems challenging. Divorced 3 years ago, she said. He wanted a wife who'd host dinner parties for his law firm. I wanted to build this. She gestured to the resort around us. After lunch, we went to her office to formalize our agreement. It was a warm space, clay walls, woven textiles, a desk made from salvaged wood. I sat beside her to review the contract, close enough that our shoulders touched while leaning over the same document. I'd love to see some of your design ideas, she said, her voice softer now that we were alone. I pulled out my sketch pad, flipping through preliminary drawings. As I explained each concept, Lindsay leaned closer. I could smell her perfume, something with notes of cardamom and sea salt. This one, she said, pointing to my most ambitious design, a massive sandcastle that incorporated elements of adobe architecture. This captures exactly what Beach Dreams is about. Her emerald eyes met mine, lingering a moment too long to be purely professional. The air between us seemed to thicken with possibility. I should get started on the scale models, I said, suddenly needing some distance to think clearly. As Lindsay walked me to my car, those men in suits emerged from the east wing, nodding curtly to her before driving away in a black SUV. Everything okay? I asked. Of course, she said too quickly. Just business. I'll see you next Monday to start setting up. As I drove away, I couldn't help feeling there was something Lindsay wasn't telling me about those men, about herself. But I was already looking forward to spending more time with her, despite the warning bells in the back of my mind. The sand was my canvas, my fingers the brushes. For 3 days straight, I worked under the New Mexico sun, crafting an elaborate display that drew growing crowds of resort guests. I'd start at dawn when the sand was still cool and damp, perfect for shaping. By mid-afternoon, tourists formed a respectful semicircle around my workspace, snapping photos and murmuring appreciation. How do you make it stay together like that? A little girl asked, watching me carve delicate windows into an adobe-inspired tower. It's all about the right amount of water, I explained, demonstrating how I misted the structure. Too much and it collapses. Too little and it crumbles. Kind of like relationships, came Lindsay's voice from behind me. I turned to find her watching, arms crossed, a smile playing on her lips. She'd been checking in daily, but always briefly, always surrounded by staff or guests. This was the first time she'd caught me alone. Been thinking about relationships a lot? I asked, wiping sand from my hands onto my already filthy jeans. Only recently, she replied, her emerald eyes holding mine for a beat too long. That evening, after the crowds dispersed and the desert air cooled, a resort employee delivered an envelope to my workshop tent. Inside was a handwritten note. Dinner on my deck at 8. Nothing formal, just food and conversation. I showered thoroughly, washing away layers of sand before slipping into a simple sundress. My hair, usually bound in a practical braid during work, fell loose around my shoulders. I debated with myself about what this dinner meant, but decided not to overthink it. Lindsay's private quarters were separate from the main resort, a modest adobe house with a sprawling deck that offered views of both the artificial lagoon and the distant mountains. She greeted me with 2 glasses of white wine. To successful collaborations, she toasted. And unexpected ones, I added. Dinner was simple but perfect. Grilled vegetables and local trout, eaten at a small table while the sunset painted the landscape in amber and rose. As darkness fell, Lindsay lit copper lanterns that cast a warm glow across the deck. Your sculptures are drawing quite a crowd, she said, refilling my glass. The marketing team says social media mentions of the resort are up 40%. I'm glad it's working out for business, I replied. But honestly, I'd be doing this even if nobody watched. There's something about creating something beautiful, knowing it's temporary. That's what drew me to your work, Lindsay said, leaning forward. Most people build things hoping they'll last forever. There's something honest about your art. The lantern light caught in her hair, turning the brown strands to burnished copper. I found myself noticing details. A small scar above her eyebrow, the constellation of freckles across her collarbone. Can I ask you something personal? I ventured. She nodded, eyes careful. What happened with your marriage? Lindsay was quiet for a moment. We wanted different things. He saw this resort as an investment, something to flip for profit. I saw it as a life's work. She swirled her wine. What about you? Any failed relationships in your past? A few, I admitted. Men who either wanted me to be more practical or treated my art like a quirky hobby. Always felt like I was trying to be someone I wasn't. And women? She asked casually, though her eyes were intent on mine. The question hung between us, honest and direct. One serious relationship in college, I said. It ended because we were young and scared of what people would think. And now? Now I'm less concerned with what people think. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibility. Lindsay moved her chair closer, her knee brushing against mine. Your hair in this light, she said softly, reaching out to touch a strand of my blonde hair. It's like liquid gold. Her fingers grazed my cheek as she tucked the strand behind my ear. I felt my breath catch, slowly giving me every chance to pull away. She leaned forward until her lips were a whisper from mine. The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, then deeper as I responded. When we finally parted, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Whatever was building between us had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no easy return, professionally or personally. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I still wondered about those men in suits and what secrets might be hiding beneath the perfect surface of Beach Dreams Resort. I worked late that night, using floodlights to finish a particularly complex sand structure, a representation of local cliff dwellings with tiny windows that caught the light. The festival opening was just days away, and I wanted everything perfect. Most resort guests had retired to their rooms, leaving the property eerily quiet except for the gentle lapping of water against the artificial shoreline. That's when I noticed it, a slight depression in the sand near the east wing, something that didn't match the natural contours I'd become intimately familiar with over the past week. Professional curiosity drew me closer. Someone had been dragging something heavy, disrupting the carefully raked beach. I followed the trail to a service door partially concealed by ornamental grasses. It was marked staff only, but my encounter with Lindsay the previous night had left me feeling less like a contractor and more like someone with privileges. The handle turned easily in my hand. Inside was a utility corridor, dimly lit and smelling of chlorine from the resort's water systems. I told myself I was just taking a shortcut back to my guest cottage, but curiosity pulled me forward like an invisible thread. The corridor split, with one direction clearly leading toward kitchens and laundry facilities. The other path sloped subtly downward. I hesitated, then chose the decline. The temperature dropped as I descended. The resort's beach casual aesthetic gave way to stark utilitarian design, concrete floors, metal doors with electronic keypads. Whatever this was, it wasn't on any of the property maps Lindsay had shown me. At the bottom of the slope, a heavy door stood slightly ajar, voices drifting from within. I crept closer, heartbeat thundering in my ears. Timeline has been accelerated, a male voice said. The data needs to be secured before the weekend festival brings additional scrutiny. Ms. Rivera has been informed, another voice responded coolly. I leaned forward, trying to glimpse the speakers, when a hand clamped firmly over my mouth from behind. I tried to scream, but the sound died against the palm pressing against my lips. Don't make a sound, Lindsay whispered directly into my ear, her body pressed against my back. She slowly removed her hand from my mouth, then grabbed my wrist, pulling me quickly back the way I'd come. We didn't speak until we were outside, well away from the service entrance. Even in the dim light, I could see the fear in her eyes. What were you doing in there? She demanded, voice low and tight. I saw disturbed sand leading to the door. What is that place? Who were those men? Lindsay ran her hands through her hair, a gesture of frustration I was beginning to recognize. It's complicated, and not something you should be involved in. Well, I am involved now, I said. Are you in trouble? Is something illegal happening at the resort? Her laugh was brittle. Illegal? No. Classified? Yes. Classified? What are you, some kind of spy? Of course not, she said, too quickly. Look, I lease space to a private government contractor. That's all I can say. That's all I'm legally allowed to say. I studied her face, trying to decipher the truth behind her careful words. Why the secrecy? Why not just tell me this was government property? Because it's complicated, she repeated. Please, Ella. For your own safety, stay away from that area. I thought about arguing further but nodded instead. Whatever was happening clearly had Lindsay scared, and that scared me too. Come to my cottage, I said. I have a bottle of wine. We can talk about anything but this. An hour later, we sat on my porch overlooking the darkened resort grounds. Lindsay had been quiet, sipping her wine slowly, but the tension in her shoulders had gradually eased. I'm sorry, she finally said, for how I reacted, for not being more forthcoming. You don't owe me explanations about your business arrangements, I replied, though curiosity still gnawed at me. She turned to face me, setting down her glass. Her fingers traced lightly along my shoulder, sending shivers across my skin. There are so many things I want to tell you, she whispered, but I need you to trust me when I say I can't. Not yet. Her touch moved to my neck, then my cheek. The questions burning in my mind dimmed as her lips found mine, more urgent than our first kiss. Whatever secrets lurked beneath Lindsay's resort, in this moment, I could only focus on the way her touch ignited something in me I'd thought long dormant. The morning of the Sand Sculpture Festival arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, minimal wind, and just enough humidity to keep my creations stable. Resort guests flooded the exhibition area, and local press circulated with cameras and microphones. Even amid the excitement, I kept glancing toward the East Wing, wondering what lay beneath those innocent-looking buildings. Your work is extraordinary, said a voice behind me as I was explaining my technique to a group of children. I turned to find a woman in her 40s, wearing a crisp black suit that seemed too formal for a beach resort in summer heat. Everything about her screamed authority, from her severe bob haircut to her perfectly manicured nails. Thank you, I replied, extending my hand. I'm Ella Wright, the artist. She ignored my outstretched hand. I know who you are, Ms. Wright. I make it my business to know everyone at Beach Dreams. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I especially make it my business to know people who wander where they shouldn't. My blood ran cold. I'm sorry, I don't... Let me be clear, she interrupted, stepping closer until we were just out of earshot of nearby guests. You're here to build sandcastles, that's it. Resort business matters are not your concern. Are we understanding each other? Before I could respond, Lindsay appeared, placing herself slightly between me and the woman in the suit. Ella, the reporter from the Albuquerque Journal, is looking for you. Her tone was casual, but her posture was protective. The woman stepped back. Ms. Rivera. We still need to discuss those budget adjustments for the East Quarter. This afternoon, Lindsay replied firmly. I'm focused on the festival right now. With a curt nod, the woman walked away, her heels somehow not sinking into the sand. Who was that? I asked once she was out of earshot. Diana Mercer. She represents the investors. Lindsay's eyes followed Diana's retreating figure. Did she say anything to you? Just admiring my work and making veiled threats, I said lightly, though my heart was still racing. Lindsay's jaw tightened. Stay away from her, Ella, please. The rest of the day passed in a blur of demonstrations and interviews. By evening, I was exhausted but exhilarated by the public response to my work. Lindsay had been busy with her own duties, but I caught her watching me from across the exhibition area several times, her expression a mixture of admiration and what looked like worry. As the crowds thinned and staff began cleaning up, Lindsay approached. Want to go for a swim? The private lagoon at the back of the property is reserved for me. No guests, no staff. 20 minutes later, we were floating in the crystal clear water. Stars were beginning to appear overhead, and underwater lights cast an ethereal blue glow across the surface. Lindsay's brown hair fanned out around her in the water like silk. You were amazing today, she said, swimming closer to me. The way you talked about your art, so passionate, so knowledgeable. It's easy to talk about something you love, I replied, treading water, very aware of her proximity. What else do you love, Ella? Her voice had dropped lower, her wet skin glistening in the blue light. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I closed the distance between us, my lips finding hers as we floated together in the warm water. Her arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. The kiss deepened, her hands moving to tangle in my wet hair. What happened next was a blur of sensation, her hands exploring under my swimsuit, my gasps echoing across the water, her whispered encouragements as she guided my hand to reciprocate. The privacy of the lagoon disappeared as our focus narrowed to each other's bodies, learning each curve and sensitive spot with eager fingers and lips. Afterward, we lay on plush towels at the lagoon's edge, a comfortable silence between us broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore. I should go, I finally said, though I made no move to leave. Stay, Lindsay murmured, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. But then she sat up abruptly, her attention caught by something across the property. Actually, you should go. I just remembered I have a late meeting. I followed her gaze and saw lights on in her office, a silhouette that looked like Diana Mercer's sharp bob visible through the window. Back in my cottage, I couldn't sleep. My body still hummed from Lindsay's touch, but my mind raced with questions. On impulse, I slipped out and made my way toward the main building. Lindsay's office light was still on, but the voices inside had risen enough that I could hear them through the partially open window. What I discovered in those documents left on Lindsay's desk changed everything. The Poseidon Protocol wasn't just using her resort, they had leverage over her, something about sovereign territory and plausible deniability. I had fallen for a woman whose resort was being used as some kind of covert operations center, and judging by these documents, Lindsay was a lot more involved than she'd led me to believe. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I couldn't walk away without knowing the truth. With trembling hands, I snapped photos of the documents with my phone, praying the camera click wouldn't alert anyone to my presence. The Poseidon Protocol, operational schematics, communications logs, I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know this was serious. As I was about to leave, the office door opened. I ducked below the window, heart hammering against my ribs. We expect full cooperation, Ms. Rivera, Diana's voice carried through the night air. Your personal entanglements are becoming a liability. My personal life is none of your concern, Lindsay replied, her voice tight with anger. Everything that happens at this resort is our concern. That was the agreement. I crept away before I could hear more, slipping back to my cottage unseen. I spent the night poring over the photos I'd taken, researching terminology, trying to make sense of it all. By dawn, my eyes were burning, but my suspicions were confirmed. Lindsay's resort was being used as a front for some kind of intelligence operation. Whether she was a willing participant or a victim remained unclear. Morning found me exhausted and conflicted, as I headed to the exhibition area to check on my sculptures. I was smoothing a weathered edge when Lindsay appeared, looking as tired as I felt. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Yes, we do. I straightened, sand falling from my fingers. Your office. Now. Her eyes widened slightly at my tone, but she nodded, leading the way back to the main building. Once inside with the door closed, I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. What the hell is this, Lindsay? What have you gotten me involved in? Her face drained of color. You went through my things? I overheard your conversation with Diana. I needed to know what I was dealing with. You had no right. She slammed her palm against the desk. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out, I shot back. Are you some kind of spy? Is this resort a cover operation? It's not that simple. She ran her hands through her hair, her anger giving way to something that looked like desperation. I built this resort with my own money, my own vision. Then they came along with their permits and water rights restrictions. Who's they? A division of the government that doesn't officially exist. They needed a private facility, somewhere off the books but with infrastructure. They threatened to shut me down over fabricated environmental violations if I didn't cooperate. So, you're being blackmailed? And I prefer to think of it as an involuntary partnership. Her attempt at humor fell flat. And I provide space, they leave the rest of my resort alone. Until recently, it was a manageable arrangement. What changed? Lindsay hesitated. You did. The accusation hung between us like a physical barrier. They think I've told you something. They think you're a security risk. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. They've been watching you since you found that entrance. And last night? Was that part of your arrangement too? Keep the nosy artist distracted with sex while your partners do whatever the hell they're doing under this resort? The pain that flashed across Lindsay's face told me I'd gone too far, but I was too angry to take it back. You think I faked that? Her voice was dangerously quiet. You think I would use my body as a distraction tactic? I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted. I just know you've been lying to me since the day we met. Not about everything. She moved toward me, but I stepped back. I need time to process this. I'm going to finish my exhibition commitments because I'm a professional. But whatever was happening between us, I gestured vaguely between us. That needs to stop until I figure out what's real. I left her office with leaden steps, feeling her eyes on my back but refusing to turn around. For the rest of the day, I threw myself into my work, ignoring the occasional black-suited figure monitoring my movements from a distance. As sunset painted the sky in violent hues of orange and red, a storm began building on the horizon, both literally and figuratively. I could feel something shifting, pressure building. Whatever was happening beneath Beach Dreams Resort was coming to a head. That night, as rain lashed against my cottage windows and thunder shook the frame, there was a desperate knocking at my door. I opened it to find Lindsay standing there, soaking wet, fear etched across her features. They know you have the photos, she said, water streaming from her hair. They're coming for your phone. For you. Get inside, I hissed, pulling Lindsay through the doorway. Rain had soaked her completely, her blue eyes wide with panic. We don't have much time, she said, pushing wet hair from her face. Delete the photos, now. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over my phone screen. How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Lightning illuminated her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the raw desperation. Ella, please. I've never lied about how I feel about you. Against my better judgment, I deleted the photos but not before sending them to my cloud storage. Lindsay didn't need to know that detail. Now what? I asked. Now we fight back. She pulled a small device from her pocket. This is a signal jammer. It'll buy us some time. The revelation shocked me. Who are you really? Before I owned this resort, I was naval intelligence, she admitted. I got out, but I still have contacts, skills. I never wanted to use them again. Suddenly, Lindsay's confidence in tense situations made perfect sense. This wasn't just a resort owner. This was a trained operative. So what's the plan? Lindsay's expression hardened into something I hadn't seen before. Calculating, strategic. We gather evidence, legitimate evidence they can't disappear. Enough to expose their operation without exposing classified information. And how exactly do we do that? There's a gala tomorrow night, fundraiser for local conservation. Diana and her entire team will be there, maintaining their cover as environmental consultants. A plan quickly formed between us. I would create a special sand sculpture for the gala, something that required constant attention near the East Wing. Lindsay would use her access to photograph specific documents proving the coercion while the team was distracted. Partners? She asked, extending her hand. I took it, feeling the cool dampness of her skin. Partners. The gala arrived in a flurry of preparation. Guests in evening wear mingled around my newest creation, a massive sand rendering of the local watershed that I'd strategically positioned with a clear view of the East Wing entrance. Lindsay looked stunning in a midnight blue dress that made her emerald eyes pop. We circulated separately, occasionally catching each other's gaze across the room. I could see Diana watching us both, her suspicion evident in her stiff posture. When the band started playing, Lindsay approached me. May I have this dance? I took her hand, letting her lead me to the dance floor. As we moved together, her hand on my lower back, we were just another couple swept up in the music. Ready? She whispered against my ear. Now? I breathed back. Follow my lead, she murmured, twirling me dramatically, far more showy than necessary. The move caught everyone's attention, including Diana's. While all eyes were on us, Lindsay stumbled slightly, bumping into a waiter who dropped his tray with a spectacular crash. In the ensuing chaos, I slipped away toward the East Wing. Lindsay had given me her security card, and I used it to access the office where she'd told me I'd find what we needed. My hands trembled as I photographed documents, contract modifications, emails, all proving the coercion Lindsay had described. I was so focused on the task that I almost didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. I barely made it out through a service entrance, heart pounding as I returned to the gala just as Lindsay was finishing helping clean up the spilled drinks. Our eyes met across the room. Mission accomplished. Later that night, adrenaline still coursing through our veins, we collapsed onto the couch in my cottage. We did it, I breathed, hardly believing we'd pulled it off. Lindsay's smile was triumphant as she pulled me closer. We make a good team. The triumph of our successful mission, the relief of having actual evidence, the thrill of danger, it all crystallized into an electric moment between us. My lips found hers, hungry and insistent. What followed was nothing like our night at the lagoon. This was urgent, almost desperate, hands fumbling with clothing, breath coming in gasps. Lindsay pressed me back against the couch cushions, her mouth tracing a burning path down my neck, across my collarbone, lower still until I was crying out, fingers tangled in her hair. When it was my turn to explore her, I discovered the small tattoo on her hip, an anchor with a date, physical evidence of her past life. She arched beneath my touch, whispering my name like a prayer, all pretense and secrets momentarily forgotten in the heat between us. Afterward, as we lay tangled together, the reality of our situation crept back in. We had evidence, but what would we do with it? Who could we trust? The danger wasn't over, it had only just begun. They know. Lindsay burst through my cottage door at dawn, her face pale. Someone saw you coming out of the office last night. I was still half asleep, but the urgency in her voice jolted me fully conscious. How bad? Diana's ordered a full security lockdown. They're searching the grounds for unauthorized materials, which means they're looking for us, for the photos. Outside, men in black security uniforms were moving systematically through the resort, stopping guests, checking bags. What about the cloud backup? Lindsay asked, watching the approaching guards through my window. They can't access it without my password, I assured her. But if they get my phone... They won't, she said firmly. Oh, Chet dressed. Pack only what you need for your final exhibition setup. Act normal. 20 minutes later, we walked openly toward the beach area. My hands trembled as I arranged my tools, but years of performing under pressure helped me maintain a calm facade while installing my final piece, a massive replica of the local mountains with tiny hidden caves throughout. Guests gathered as usual, but now they were interspersed with Diana's agents, watching our every move. They're closing in, Lindsay murmured, pretending to admire my work. 4 at the north entrance, 2 by the lagoon. What's the plan? I asked through a forced smile, patting sand into place. Wait for my signal, then run for the maintenance shed. There's an ATV there. I nodded imperceptibly, continuing my demonstration for the growing crowd. An hour passed, then another. The tension was unbearable, but I kept sculpting, kept smiling. Then everything happened at once. Diana approached from the resort, 2 men flanking her. At the same moment, Lindsay knocked over a water container, shouting about the mess. As everyone's attention shifted to her, she gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. I bolted, using the dunes as cover, racing toward the maintenance shed. Behind me, I heard shouts, then Lindsay's voice, commanding, authoritative. Federal agent, stand down! When I reached the shed, Lindsay was seconds behind me, something metallic gleaming in her hand. You brought a gun? I gasped as she used it to break the ATV's ignition lock. Old habits, she replied grimly, hot-wiring the vehicle with practiced ease. Get on. I jumped on behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist as she gunned the engine. We tore across the beach, sand spraying behind us, agents in pursuit. They're gaining, I shouted over the engine's roar. Lindsay veered sharply toward the water's edge where the sand was firmer. They don't know this terrain like I do. She was right. The pursuing ATVs bogged down in soft sand as Lindsay skillfully navigated us along the shoreline, eventually cutting inland through a narrow path only locals would know. Where are we going? I yelled against the wind. I have a friend, ex-Navy SEAL. He has a place about 20 miles from here. The desert landscape blurred around us as we raced toward safety, the resort disappearing behind us. Only when we were deep into the scrublands did Lindsay slow our pace. They won't find us easily out here, she said, navigating through brush on barely visible trails. But they'll be looking. An hour later, we arrived at an unassuming cabin nestled against rocky outcroppings. A tall, weathered man met us at the door, shotgun in hand. "Took you long enough," he said by way of greeting, ushering us inside. "Ella, this is Marcus." Lindsay introduced us. We served together. Marcus's cabin was Spartan but secure. No internet, landline only, multiple escape routes. While Lindsay filled him in, I uploaded our evidence to a secure server using Marcus's satellite phone. "This is bigger than I thought," Marcus said, reviewing the documents. "This Poseidon Protocol. It's a black site operation using private land to skirt federal oversight laws. Can we stop them?" I asked. "With this evidence? Maybe." He looked at Lindsay. "But they'll bury you both first if they catch you." "Then they won't catch us," Lindsay said with quiet determination. We spent the night planning our next move. Marcus had contacts in the Federal Oversight Committee, people who could act on our evidence without exposing classified operations. As dawn broke, I stood on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunrise paint the desert in gold and pink. Lindsay joined me, her hand finding mine. "I never meant to drag you into this," she said softly. "I walked in willingly," I reminded her, "literally through that service door." Her laugh was quiet but genuine, the first I'd heard since this all began. When this is over, I echoed, squeezing her hand. "If we survive." "We'll survive," she said with conviction. "I've got too much to live for now." 3 days after seeking refuge at Marcus's cabin, we watched on his ancient television as federal agents swarmed Beach Dreams Resort. The raid made national news, a private intelligence operation using a civilian business as cover, operating outside legal boundaries on American soil. "They're calling it a victory for oversight," Marcus commented, turning up the volume as the news anchor detailed how anonymous whistleblowers had exposed the operation. Lindsay sat beside me, her fingers laced with mine. "Anonymous sounds good to me." The investigation moved quickly. Diana and her team were taken into custody. The evidence we'd provided, showing how Lindsay had been coerced, cleared her of wrongdoing. After giving statements to Justice Department officials, we were free to return to the resort. The place felt different now. Government seals on the East Wing doors, fewer guests, staff whispering in corners. But it was still standing, still Lindsay's dream. "What will you do now?" I asked as we walked along the shore where my sand sculptures had once stood. The exhibition area was empty now, my creations reclaimed by wind and maintenance crews. "Rebuild," she said simply, without the shadow of Poseidon hanging over me. I picked up a handful of sand, letting it filter through my fingers. "And what about us?" Lindsay stopped walking, turning to face me. "That depends. Your exhibition contract is technically fulfilled. You could go back to your regular life." "Is that what you want?" Her eyes, those incredible emerald eyes, held mine. "No, that's not what I want at all." We spent the next 6 months transforming Beach Dreams. Lindsay used the publicity from the scandal to rebrand the resort as an arts venue. I designed permanent sand sculpture gardens with special preservation techniques, teaching classes to guests who came specifically to learn the craft. The East Wing was completely renovated, transformed into galleries featuring local artists. No more secrets, no more hidden passages. Every space now filled with light and creativity. On the day of the grand reopening, I stood back watching Lindsay cut the ceremonial ribbon. She'd changed in these months, lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted. Her laugh came more easily, her smiles more frequent. She caught my eye across the crowd and made her way to me. "What do you think? Did we pull it off?" "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "Even better than your original vision." "Our vision now," she corrected, taking my hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She led me to a special exhibition area we'd kept curtained off during preparations. With a dramatic flourish, she pulled back the fabric to reveal my largest permanent installation yet. 2 women building a sandcastle together, their figures caught in a moment of shared creation, faces turned toward each other with unmistakable affection. "It's us," I whispered, moved by seeing our story captured this way. "It's us," Lindsay agreed, "and I had them install this." She pointed to a small plaque that read, "Where we begin permanent collection." "Permanent?" I asked, the word catching in my throat. "I was hoping you might be too." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small box. Not just the artist in residence, but... My heart stuttered as she opened it to reveal a simple silver key. "What's this?" "Key to my house," she said. "Well, Our house, if you want. I bought that little beach cottage you love down the coast. The one with the blue shutters? She nodded. It needs work. The foundation's solid, but it could use an artist's touch. I took the key, feeling its weight in my palm, the weight of a future I hadn't imagined possible when I first reached for that purple tomatillo at the farmer's market. So what do you say? Then Lindsay asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Want to build something permanent with me? I pulled her close, aware of the crowd watching but not caring. When I kissed her, it felt like the culmination of our unlikely journey, from chance meeting to conspiracy to partnership. Yes, I said against her lips. When as long as you'll let me build sandcastles in the yard. Every day, she promised. For as long as they last, and then we'll build more.